Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie from Into English Podcasts, and welcome to today's episode. If you're listening right now, there's a good chance that you want to improve your relationship with money. Maybe you want to manage your income more effectively, reduce financial stress, or begin building long-term wealth. But before we talk about investing, budgeting strategies, or financial planning, we need to start with something even more fundamental. We need to talk about what personal finance actually means and why so many people struggle with it. Because here is an interesting paradox. Money is one of the most influential forces in modern life, yet many people spend years studying subjects that they may never use again, while learning almost nothing about managing money. Think about it for a moment. Most schools teach mathematics, literature, history, and science, but very few teach students how to manage debt, build savings, or understand how investments work. As a result, millions of people enter adulthood with little understanding of how money actually functions in their daily lives, and then society expects them to make responsible financial decisions. It's a bit like asking someone to drive a car after giving them a textbook about engines, but never teaching them how to actually steer. So today, we are going to build a foundation. This episode will explore the core principles of personal finance, beginning with one simple but powerful idea. If you do not control your money, eventually your money will control you. Many people assume that personal finance is primarily about numbers. They imagine spreadsheets, calculations, interest rates, and complicated investment strategies. But interestingly, research in behavioral economics suggests that financial success is influenced less by mathematical intelligence and more by behavioral habits. In other words, personal finance is not just about what you know, it is about what you consistently do. Consider two individuals who earn the exact same salary. They live in the same city, work similar jobs, and have similar expenses. One of them saves a portion of their income every month, tracks spending, and avoids unnecessary debt. The other spends impulsively, finances purchases with credit cards, and postpones financial planning. At the end of 1 year, their financial situations might still appear similar. But after 10 years, the difference could be enormous. The first person may have built savings, investments, and financial stability. The second person may still be living paycheck to paycheck. The difference is not intelligence. The difference is behavior. And that is why personal finance is often described as a long-term discipline rather than a short-term strategy. Another reason personal finance can be difficult is because money decisions are rarely purely logical. They are often emotional. People spend money to reward themselves. They spend money to reduce stress. Sometimes they spend money simply because other people around them are spending. Psychologists refer to this phenomenon as social comparison. Humans naturally compare their lives with those of others. If friends buy a new car, someone may feel pressured to upgrade their own. If coworkers take luxury vacations, someone might feel the need to do the same. This behavior is understandable, but it can quietly damage financial stability. One of the biggest financial traps people fall into is something called lifestyle inflation. Lifestyle inflation occurs when people increase their spending every time their income increases. Imagine someone receives a salary raise. Instead of saving or investing the additional income, they upgrade their lifestyle. They move to a more expensive apartment. They buy a newer car. They dine at more expensive restaurants. Individually, these decisions may seem reasonable, but collectively, they can prevent someone from ever building meaningful financial security because their spending always rises to match their income, and sometimes it even exceeds it. Modern culture also plays a significant role in shaping financial behavior. Social media platforms constantly expose us to images of success and luxury. Beautiful homes, exotic vacations, expensive watches, successful entrepreneurs. At first glance, these images appear inspiring. but they can also create unrealistic expectations about how life should look. The truth is that what we see online is often carefully curated. We see the highlight moments. We rarely see the financial reality behind them. Some individuals who appear wealthy may actually have significant debt. Others may have unstable income streams, and many successful people have spent years quietly building their financial position before achieving visible success. But social media rarely shows the years of discipline, it shows the result. And that can create subtle psychological pressure to spend more money than we should. It's a bit like comparing your entire life to someone else's highlight reel. So if personal finance is not just about earning more money, and not just about complicated investment strategies, then what is it really about? At its core, personal finance is about alignment. It is about aligning your financial decisions with your long-term goals and values. For some people, financial success might mean early retirement. For others, it might mean the freedom to start a business. For someone else, it might simply mean living without financial stress. There is no single definition of financial success, but there is a common requirement. You must develop the ability to manage money intentionally rather than reactively. Reactive financial behavior occurs when people make decisions based on immediate circumstances. They spend when they feel like spending. They save only when they happen to have extra money. They invest only after hearing about someone else making profits. Intentional financial behavior is different. It involves planning. It involves understanding your financial priorities. And it involves making consistent decisions that support those priorities over time. The first step toward financial control is something surprisingly simple: awareness. Many people experience financial stress not because they earn too little, but because they do not clearly understand their financial situation. They do not know exactly how much they spend each month. They are not aware of how small expenses accumulate, and they may not fully understand how their financial habits affect their long-term future. Imagine driving a car without a dashboard. You cannot see your speed, you cannot see the fuel level, and you cannot see warning signals from the engine. Eventually, something will go wrong, but you will not notice until the problem becomes serious. Money works in a very similar way. If you do not track your financial activity, you cannot effectively manage it. And that brings us to one of the most powerful tools in personal finance: understanding where your money actually goes. Now, let's move deeper into one of the most fundamental principles in personal finance, a principle so simple that it almost sounds obvious. Yet at the same time, it is one of the hardest rules for many people to follow. That principle is this: spend less than you earn. It sounds almost too simple to be meaningful, but in reality, this single rule controls almost every aspect of personal finance. Imagine two financial worlds. In the first world, a person consistently spends more money than they earn. At first, the difference might seem small. Maybe they spend an extra $100 this month, maybe $200 the next. Because modern financial systems provide easy access to credit, it can feel harmless. Credit cards allow people to postpone payment. Loans allow people to acquire things they cannot immediately afford. But over time, the gap between income and spending begins to grow. Interest accumulates, debt expands, and gradually, financial stress begins to appear. Now imagine the second world. In this world, a person consistently spends less than they earn. Even if the difference is small, perhaps 5 or 10% of their income, something very different happens. Instead of accumulating debt, they begin accumulating savings. Instead of paying interest to lenders, they can eventually earn returns on their investments. Over time, the gap between these two financial worlds becomes enormous. One leads toward increasing financial pressure, the other leads toward increasing financial flexibility. And it all begins with that simple rule: spend less than you earn. If the rule is so simple, why do so many people struggle with it? The answer lies in human psychology. Humans are naturally biased toward immediate rewards. Psychologists call this phenomenon present bias. Present bias means we tend to prioritize short-term pleasure over long-term benefits. Buying something today feels good immediately. Saving that money for the future provides a benefit that feels distant and abstract. For example, imagine two choices. Choice A, spend $100 today on something enjoyable. Choice B, save that $100 and potentially benefit from it years later. For many people, the immediate reward of spending feels more tangible than the distant benefit of saving. This is why budgeting often feels emotionally difficult. It requires us to resist short-term gratification in order to create long-term stability. And unfortunately, modern consumer culture is designed to encourage the opposite behavior. Every advertisement, every sale, and every promotional campaign is designed to trigger spending. Retailers use phrases like limited time offer, special discount, exclusive deal. These messages create urgency. They make people feel that if they do not buy something immediately, they might miss an opportunity. In reality, most of these opportunities will appear again next week. Another challenge in personal finance is something called incremental spending. Incremental spending refers to small purchases that appear insignificant individually but accumulate over time. Let's look at a simple example. Imagine someone buys a $5 coffee every weekday. $5 may not seem like much, but if they purchase it 5 days a week, that becomes $25 per week. Over a year, that adds up to approximately $1,300. Now consider other small expenses: food delivery, streaming subscriptions, ride-sharing services, impulse purchases online. Individually, each expense may feel minor, but collectively, they can represent a significant portion of someone's income. This does not mean people should never enjoy small luxuries. Life is meant to be enjoyed, but awareness is important. The key question is not whether spending money is good or bad. The key question is whether the spending is intentional. Intentional spending means choosing expenses that genuinely improve your quality of life. Unintentional spending occurs when money disappears without conscious decision-making. And surprisingly, many people experience the second scenario more often than they realize. This leads us to one of the most powerful habits in personal finance: tracking your spending. When people first hear this idea, they often imagine complicated spreadsheets or strict budgeting systems. But tracking your money does not need to be complicated. It simply means observing where your money goes. For example, someone might spend 1 month recording every expense they make: groceries, transportation, entertainment, subscriptions, dining out. After a few weeks, patterns begin to appear. Some expenses may be expected, but others might be surprising. Many people discover subscriptions they forgot about. Others realize how frequently they spend money on convenience services. Tracking spending transforms money from something abstract into something visible, and visibility changes behavior. When people become aware of their spending patterns, they often begin making adjustments naturally, not because they are forced to, but because they finally see the full picture. One common misconception about personal finance is that budgeting restricts freedom. People imagine that controlling spending means eliminating enjoyment from life, but the opposite is actually true. Financial control often increases freedom. When you manage your money carefully, you reduce financial stress, you build savings, you create options to handle unexpected situations, options to pursue new opportunities, options to make life decisions without constant financial pressure. For example, someone with savings might have the flexibility to change careers or start a business. Someone living paycheck to paycheck may not have that option. In this sense, financial discipline is not about restriction. It is about creating flexibility for the future. And that flexibility is one of the most valuable forms of wealth. Another important concept in personal finance is the power of small decisions over time. Financial success rarely comes from a single dramatic event. It usually comes from many small decisions repeated consistently. Saving a small percentage of income, avoiding unnecessary debt, investing regularly, tracking spending. Individually, these actions may seem minor, but over many years, their effects compound. And the opposite is also true. Small financial mistakes repeated consistently can gradually create significant problems. Overspending slightly each month, ignoring debt, postponing savings. Over time, these patterns accumulate. This is why personal finance is often described as a long-term habit system rather than a quick strategy. It is not about making one perfect decision. It is about making many good decisions consistently. Once someone begins living below their means, the next stage of financial development involves two important goals. First, building financial protection. Second, building long-term financial growth. These two ideas form the backbone of a stable financial life, and the first step in financial protection is something called an emergency fund. Life has a habit of being unpredictable. Most of us like to imagine that our lives will follow a stable and predictable path. We expect our jobs to continue. We expect our expenses to remain manageable. We expect that nothing unusual will disrupt our financial situation. But reality often has different plans. Cars break down, companies restructure, medical emergencies happen. Unexpected repairs appear when we least expect them. And when those situations occur, the difference between financial stress and financial stability often comes down to one simple factor: savings. An emergency fund is exactly what it sounds like. It is money set aside specifically for unexpected events. It is not meant for vacations. It is not meant for shopping. It is not even meant for planned expenses. Its purpose is protection. Financial experts often recommend saving 3 to 6 months of living expenses. This amount provides a buffer in case someone loses their income temporarily. Now, for many people, that number may feel intimidating. Saving several months of expenses can sound overwhelming, especially for someone who is just beginning their financial journey. But it is important to remember that an emergency fund does not appear overnight. It is built gradually. Many financial advisors recommend starting with a smaller goal. For example, saving $1,000. That amount alone can prevent many minor emergencies from turning into debt. Over time, the fund can grow larger. And as it grows, something interesting happens. Financial anxiety begins to decrease. Because when unexpected events occur, you are prepared. There's an interesting distinction in personal finance that many people overlook: the difference between being broke and being temporarily out of cash. Being broke means you have no financial resources available. An unexpected expense immediately creates a crisis. Being temporarily out of cash is different. It simply means your money is currently allocated elsewhere, but you still have savings or assets that can support you. This difference may sound subtle, but it has a huge impact on financial stress. Someone with an emergency fund may face the same unexpected expense as someone without one, but the emotional experience is completely different. Instead of panic, there is simply a financial adjustment. And that sense of security is one of the most valuable benefits of responsible financial planning. After building an emergency fund, the next topic we need to discuss is debt. Debt is one of the most controversial topics in personal finance. Some people believe all debt is dangerous. Others treat debt casually as if it has no long-term consequences. The truth lies somewhere between these two extremes. Debt is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. It is a tool, and like any tool, its impact depends on how it is used. For example, borrowing money to invest in education can increase future earning potential. Borrowing money to start a well-planned business may create opportunities. However, high-interest consumer debt can be extremely damaging. Credit cards are the most common example. Credit cards are convenient, and when used responsibly, they can provide useful benefits. But they also carry high interest rates. If someone carries a credit card balance for long periods of time, the interest begins to compound, and compounding works both ways. When investments compound, wealth grows, but when debt compounds, financial pressure grows as well. Unfortunately, compound interest does not care whether it is helping you or hurting you. High-interest debt is dangerous because it creates a financial environment where progress becomes difficult. Imagine someone has a credit card balance with a 20% annual interest rate. If they make only minimum payments, a significant portion of their payment may go toward interest rather than reducing the principal balance. This means the debt can remain for years. And during that time, the borrower is essentially paying for past spending with future income. This is why many financial experts recommend eliminating high-interest debt as quickly as possible. Every dollar used to reduce high-interest debt is essentially generating a guaranteed return equal to the interest rate. And in many cases, that return is quite high. Once someone has controlled their spending, built an emergency fund, and managed their debt responsibly, the next stage of personal finance becomes possible: investing. Investing is the process of allocating money into assets that have the potential to grow over time. This could include stocks, bonds, real estate, or other financial instruments. But the real magic of investing is not simply buying assets. The real magic lies in time. One of the most powerful forces in finance is compound growth. Compound growth occurs when investment returns begin generating additional returns. In simple terms, your money begins working for you. Imagine investing a small amount of money regularly over many years. At first, the growth may appear slow, but over time, something remarkable begins to happen. The investment gains begin generating their own gains, and those gains generate even more gains. This process accelerates over time, which is why starting early is one of the most powerful advantages in investing. Even small investments can grow significantly if they are given enough time. Many people hesitate to begin investing because they believe they must find the perfect moment to enter the market. They worry about buying at the wrong time. They worry about market volatility, and they worry about losing money. These concerns are understandable. Financial markets do experience fluctuations, but interestingly, many experienced investors focus less on timing the market and more on time in the market. In other words, staying invested for long periods of time. Historically, markets tend to grow alongside economic progress. Businesses innovate, industries expand, technology advances, and over time, those developments are reflected in asset values. This does not mean markets move upward every day. They experience cycles, but long-term participation has historically been one of the most reliable paths to wealth accumulation. When people hear the phrase financial freedom, they often imagine extravagant lifestyles, luxury cars, private islands, or early retirement at age 30. But financial freedom does not necessarily mean extreme wealth. At its core, financial freedom means having options. Options to make decisions based on what you value rather than what your finances force you to do. It might mean having the flexibility to change careers. It might mean taking time to pursue a personal project, or simply having the peace of mind that unexpected financial challenges will not disrupt your life. True financial freedom is less about showing wealth and more about reducing financial pressure. And that kind of freedom is often built slowly through discipline and patience, not through sudden windfalls or risky speculation. Let's briefly bring everything together. Personal finance begins with awareness, understanding your income, your spending habits, and your financial behavior. From there, the first principle is simple but powerful. Spend less than you earn. Once that habit is established, the next step is building protection through an emergency fund. Then comes responsible management of debts. And finally, long-term investing allows your money to grow through the power of compound returns. None of these steps require extraordinary intelligence, but they do require something that is sometimes even more difficult: consistency. Because personal finance is not about one perfect decision. It is about thousands of small decisions made over many years, and those decisions gradually shape the financial life you experience. So if you are just beginning your journey with personal finance, do not worry about becoming an expert overnight. Focus on the fundamentals. Build strong financial habits, and give time the opportunity to work in your favor. Thank you for listening to this episode. And remember, controlling your money is not about restriction. It is about creating the freedom to live the life you actually want. I'll see you in the next episode.